Primary control with critical vehicle function.
Welcome to Future Thinking, episode 142. My name is Alexander Schatten. This is primarily a German podcast, but with an increasing number of English episodes. You can filter by language on the podcast website. Now, you're in for a Christmas treat. I'm happy to present Tom Vasel from the Dice Tower for a conversation about games. Games that have accompanied us as humans for thousands of years and will most likely continue to do so far into the future. This time, I'll introduce my special guest during the conversation, so stay tuned. If you like this podcast, please recommend it to friends, colleagues and family and subscribe in your podcast player of choice. Also, my new book is out, Hexenmeister oder Zauberlehrling, die Wissensgesellschaften der Krise, obviously for German audience. So you're still in the Christmas present, you've got it. So now, without further ado, here's the conversation with Tom Vasel. Hello Tom, thank you for taking time for a conversation.
Hello, welcome. Thank you for letting me be here.
I had another podcast episode with Professor Daston and we talked about rules and then we came also to games. And at that point in time, it came to me, actually games is a pretty interesting topic in the field of my podcast too, maybe an unconventional one you don't think of it at the first moment. I also think in that case, you might be a bit of an unconventional guest in that sense, because my guess is that outside of the hobby of board games, you're probably not known that well. But I want to say within the board game hobby, probably everyone knows you. Is this a correct assessment?
Possibly. I mean, people who just play board games might not know who I am, but in the industry, a lot of people do.
You're doing this for at least 25 years, board game reviews, working in the board game industry, doing board game events like your company's Dice Tower. You have a number of employees. You're doing Dice Tower
Yes,
East,
sir.
West, the Dice Tower Cruise. And I think you reviewed about 10,000 games. Is that correct? In the ballpark?
Not quite.
Not quite.
I haven't even played 10,000 games yet, but that will happen either this year or next year. But I've reviewed probably 5,000 to 7,000. I don't actually keep track of the number. We've definitely done over 10,000 videos. There's a lot of videos on our channel.
Over 10,000 videos created, because it's not only you, it's also the Dice Tower crew and the other Dice Tower members.
Right.
So the reason why I came to the game topic is when we talk about humans, my channel is more about science and about topics that influence our future. And when you think about humans as a cultural phenomenon, if you will, you usually talk about politics, about war, about science, technology, maybe art. But interestingly, you rarely talk about games. And I just made a bit of online research, and I will put the links in the show notes. I don't want to bore people with that. But when you look at it, board games, the oldest games seem to go back at least 5,000 years. So board games seem to be something that accompany us as a human society culture for a very, very long time. Some of the games like Mahjong, or what do I have here on the list, or Pachisi, backgammon, older chess games and so on, are even played today. So evidently we are a gaming species, no?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, yes, humans always seek entertainment in some sort of way, and they like the idea of being intellectually superior to somebody else. Sports has been around for a long time, and board gaming is sort of a subgenre of that to some degree. So people are playing games like you mentioned. The oldest game is probably from but there's also, we know the ancient Egyptians played games, the Romans played games, India had a lot of different games. And as time went by, that morphed and changed. In the past 300 years, card games have become more popular amongst people, but they're always looking for something to do.
Of course, gambling one could also put in the larger area of games, but that's not really your field of interest, right?
Well, gambling is just a game with added stakes to it.
Yeah.
So it is a game. It's just, if you played Yahtzee and then said whoever got the highest score, everyone puts in $50, and it's no different than poker. It's just a different style of way. Most gambling uses some sort of game, even if it's just a very boring game of roll the dice and see what you get.
Speaking of which, roll the dice and see what you get. In one of your recent interviews, I don't exactly remember what game that was. It was some sort of a game with a funnel gizmo where I think you put in balls or some such sort. And during this review, you said something interesting. You said you were not so impressed by the game, I want to say, but you said something to the effect of, "Yeah, but where's the game here, right?" So you have like a gizmo that does something, but where's the game? So I would now put the question back to you. So indeed, where is the game? So what is a game for us and what is just a chore? Or because like if we both would have a die in our hand, we would just throw the die and move a figure forward. Probably this wouldn't be very interesting for either of us. So what is a game?
Sure. When I say there's no game here in a review, I'm probably implying there's no good game here. I think a game needs a winner. So there has to be someone to win, even if in the past 30 years, there's been a modern renaissance in board gaming where there's cooperative games. So everybody can win or everybody can lose. But then I would argue the game wins. So there's a winner and then there's some sort of methodology to get to that win. Now, some games, like you said, if a very simple game, you and I both roll a die. Whoever rolls higher wins. We have nothing we can do to influence who wins. It is all luck. But if I can make a choice before we roll that die, to maybe I can roll 2 dice and take the higher result. I made a small decision. It still might be very lucky, but now there's some decisions. So then gaming will go anywhere in between that till you get to games like chess, where there is no luck. It is all strategic decisions. And so gaming exists in between those two posts.
So the post that you opened had something to do with luck, but you also mentioned the word choice. So is it degrees of freedom seem to play a role, right? Because if the degrees of freedom that I have in a game is very narrow, then it's probably not interesting. But if the degrees of freedoms are too big, then it might be also not interesting because we get lost in the situation, no?
Possibly, but you have to remember people like the illusion of choice, not necessarily they need choice. So going back to gambling, a slot machine, there is zero choice really. The only choice you have is how much will you bet per each spin or where will you stop? And modern slot machines, they know this. They'll have you spin, 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 and then suddenly you'll win a little bit of money and they'll say, pick one of these bubbles. Does it matter which bubble you pick? Not really, but it gives you that illusion of choice. And a lot of people don't care if they don't have a lot of choice in games because of how popular things like slot machines are. You go to the casino, people are playing those. There's no choice really, but people sometimes just want to switch off their brains and have some mindless entertainment. Thus, that's why a lot of games with very high levels of luck exist because people don't care about choice. Sometimes they do. I mean, I care about it a lot, and a lot of people do, but I would say not everyone does.
Illusion of choice is very interesting. I didn't think about that. By the way, also in gambling, as far as I know, like when you think of the old gambling machines that were largely mechanical or had some like pachinko or something like that in Japan, as far as I know, there you had the luck more or less was established in the building of the machine, if you will. But my understanding is many of the modern gambling machines are actually computers that even trick you in a way. They give you like, oh, you might now stop playing because you lost too much, so we let you win a little bit, and then so this illusion of choice seems to be something very powerful, also in a negative way for us. Also, when you think of the scroll addiction and that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's a fascinating thing, and I don't know all the different psychology behind all of it. I just know that if you give people options, even if those options are very similar, they feel like you're letting them make a choice and it makes them happier. I take my kids out to eat and I say, here are 2 restaurants, pick between them. I don't care because I already narrowed it down from 200 restaurants to 2. So I'm happy and I've kind of decided for them, but now they have this illusion of choice because they're picking one of those and they feel like they had something to do with it.
Which brings me, you mentioned children, which brings me to another very interesting topic, and maybe a topic that is also, let's say, connected to what you said previously, namely who is actually playing, or we could also put it further, who is playing with who? Because also a friend of mine is biologist, and I also had biologists on the channel, and you realize that playing games is not only a human thing, even animals play games, and not only the juveniles play games, but also adults in some cases. For instance, chimpanzees or dolphins, cats, dogs, even elephants play what you could call a sort of game. So my point is, games is evidently something that is not only tied to humans, but even when you go to humans, for instance, is there a difference between how children play with children, or how children play with adults, or adults with adults? Also, especially to what we said before in terms of choices, luck, and all of these things.
Well, I mean, generally, children do not take gaming as seriously as adults. Children just want to have fun. I don't know if you've ever watched the finals of a chess match, but they don't look like they're having any fun at all. And they are, maybe there's levels of fun, right? But kids just want to have a good time. Adults want to take a game more seriously, even if they say they don't. Look how many fights have broken up out over Scrabble or Monopoly or what have you. And so I think we should strive to be more like children when we play games. We should strive to have more fun. We should, do our best. But at the end of the day, if it is an entertainment thing, our enjoyment should come from the playing, not from necessarily the winning. Because if you derive your enjoyment from winning, if you don't win very often, then your hobby, your entertainment is going to make you feel worse.
I mean, you play with a lot of different people, a lot of different players. Maybe there are different styles also among adults, because for me, I realized that when I'm playing board games, I tend to rather go towards the simpler ones in terms of rule complexity. Also because people I play with, like my wife or certain friends, they are not so enthusiastic about learning an hour, like playing Brass Birmingham and learning 1.5 hours rules before I can start playing, right? So, but then for me, I realized that I find it very entertaining or entertaining for myself if other people on the table enjoy the process. So I would rather prefer to lose a game, but everyone has fun, than winning a game and realizing everyone else is like disappointed about it. Is this uncommon, you think? Or is this, you see different characteristics in players?
Yeah, it's basically different people. Some people, I think, just innately really want to win. Now, you can train yourself to not care so much about it. You can train yourself that it's not a big deal, because I think your identity shouldn't be win or lose. Because if that's the case, you're not going to enjoy life in general, because you're going to lose at things in life too. But enjoying the process, I think, is important. And some kids have a very hard time losing games. They cry, they get upset, they get angry when they lose. And as adults, we constantly say, well, we need to teach them. We need to teach them that losing isn't a big deal. We say, don't be a sore loser. But yet, when adults act that way, we are more forgiving. And I don't know why, because it's a behavior, I think, that isn't very conducive to everyone else.
Yeah, my wife always jokingly, when we play a game and she loses, she throws and says, shitty game.
Sure. And again, I'm not saying you shouldn't be disappointed when you lose, because that's natural, right? Somebody has to stand and get the silver medal at the Olympics, and somebody came in last in the race. I've always thought about that when you go home and you say, not only did I lose in the Olympics, but I came in last, But then I think, but also you were the best in your country. You went there, you did something. That's why I think games that have a lot of choices are more enjoyable to people, because they get to do something. If I had so much fun enjoying the process of the game and I got to accomplish something, I might have lost, but I still did well. And modern games are better about that. Old games, let's take chess, for example, you win or you lose. There's no example. But if a game has points and you get 100 points, but I got 92, I feel pretty good about that. I might have lost, but I still did well.
I would like to come to this topic of how games changed over time a little bit later, maybe. I would just like to finish the question, who plays games? Because I see there is also a new trend maybe in the last years, because we said adults play with adults, or children play with children, adults play with children. But clearly a trend of the last years is also solo games. So there is quite a number of also big games that are supposed to be played by one person alone. How do you see this trend, also in terms of what we discussed until now?
I'm okay with the trend. I think it's fine to play games by yourself, but to me, the joy of gaming is to play with other people. I'm not a fan of sometimes the fragmentation of humans. Social media tends to fragment us more than bring us together. You get online and you talk to some people, but you're not really having a deep, meaningful relationship with them. You're just having very surface level. But with board gaming, when you play with other people, you sit around a table and you're really enjoying that process of going back and forth with them. Solo gaming takes away from that, but I'm not opposed to it because, hey, sometimes you cannot find people to game with, but I would never hope that it becomes a bigger deal. Now, to what you said, otherwise, people playing games, it's really grown in the last few years. But I think part of that is because our ideas have changed in the past 20, 30 years of what is the realm of children and what is the realm of adults. Take Lego. When I was a
Mm.
child, no adults did Lego. It was for kids. Now, more adults play with Lego. If you go to the Lego store, you'll see more adults there than you see kids, for sure. And I think it's annoying to me because I can't even buy Lego sets for cheap because they've raised the prices and made it an adult hobby. Board gaming is very similar. Kids like to play board games, but as my generation has grown up, it is no longer looked at as a childish pursuit as much. Still, some people do, but for the most part, it is now an accepted hobby that people can do as adults. But for a while, let's say maybe a 50-year period, if you talked about board games, people would say board games are for children.
Yeah, but that's interesting. So I see two things here. I mean, on the one hand, you had certain games, think of games like bridge or chess or whatever. These were always established adult games in Victorian times. Even bridges was like something that you did after dinner or something like that, right? So
Yeah, card
it
games
was,
are a different animal. Card games have been considered to be adult, but board games, if there was a board, with the exception of chess,
yes.
most board games were looked at as it's a kid's game.
What changed then though? Did the type of games change? Did our society become infantilized in the sense of that we don't want to grow up? Did both
Well,
happen
there's
or?
definitely a lot of that. My generation, Generation X, definitely does not want to grow up. We want our toys, we want our stuff, and the world caters to us at this point in time. Look at the movies. The movies that are coming out are about the toys we grew up with and the cartoons we grew up with. And so I'm not trying to put judgment here or bad or good. I'm just saying that it's definitely it's now acceptable to do all sorts of things. Video games were very much in the same category. When I was a child, the only people who played video games were children for the most part, and boys for that matter. Only boys played video games. Now everyone plays video games, adults, old people, young people, women, men. And so board games is the sibling of video games. So I think it kind of carries over that way.
By the way, this is not entirely new when I'm thinking of it. For instance, think of comic books. Like comic books in the 50s or 60s were assumed, at least in Europe, Germany, were assumed to be very low class literature. And even you would warn not to give them to children and stuff like that. And there's the interesting story of the Mickey Mouse comic, the Donald Duck comic books, like Karl Barks from the 50s, 60s, 70s on. When it came to Germany, they searched for a translator for German, and you probably don't know that, but there was Dr. Erika Fuchs, and she was actually a literature scientist, or she had literature studies. She had a PhD, and because she had no other job, then she started translating the Karl Barks comics into German. And today they are assumed to be like jewel, if you will, her translations from Karl Barks to German. So what I'm wanting to say is, maybe this is the same development with games as it was with comics 40 years ago.
I think so.
That also the genre matures maybe in a certain way.
Yeah, things have just changed. Movies, my dad would probably have never gone to see a superhero movie, but now they do. So I think board games falls in that category. I've seen it in my lifetime. I've been reviewing games for 23 years, and when I first started reviewing games, people said board games, but now people are not as surprised when I tell them. I mean, it's still an unusual job, but I don't get as much people rolling their eyes. They think now I get the response is, that's really neat. While 20 years ago, people would go, huh?
Which brings me to maybe close this topic. So you said people play for entertainment, for escapism, maybe because you just want to, after a hard day of work, you just want to, I don't know, cool down or something like that. But do you think that there is something to the idea that people, children learn something by playing games? Better social behavior, social interaction, or I don't know, maybe strategic thinking or whatever. Because I remember when I was a child, many parents sent their children to chess courses because allegedly that would improve your, I don't know, your logical thinking or some such stuff. If it's true or not, I don't know.
Well, no, I 100% believe that. I think games should be used as, I think they're fun. And so they're a useful educational thing. They teach strategy, they teach logic, they teach decision making, they teach how to deal with other people in person. They teach you how to accept loss, how to deal with victory. They teach you how to build on things that you've done before. They teach language skills. They teach math skills. There are now games that teach science and history. I think games are amazing at promoting development. And frankly, I don't know how true it is or not, but one of the reasons I will continue to play board games is because I want to keep my brain active so that I can fight off dementia and other things as I get older. I want my brain to be constantly thinking and learning.
Because we talked about games in general, let's go a bit to the modern gaming world, so to speak. So maybe can you give my viewers an overview? How is the gaming industry at the moment? So how many games are produced or published every year? And maybe also how big is the industry, or also what types of games are there that you would consider a modern game?
So I'm not 100% sure how many board games come out a given year, different new board games, but I just looked into it a little bit, and I would say it's around 5 to 6,000
Every
different
year.
games. Well, yeah, that came out this past year in 2025. I
Okay.
don't know. I don't know before that. The number's been going up. Part of that is the barrier of entry to making a board game is much lower than it used to be. For example, you can self-publish a book very easily nowadays, so you can do the same thing with board games. There's a lot of games that have come out, and a lot of that is due to the rise of the internet, because I can now find, there might only be 400 people in the world who want to play my game, but I can find them because of the internet. But part of it also is gaming has become a more popular hobby. A lot of this stems to a few important games. Dungeons and Dragons, whether you like it or not, definitely had a huge impact on the hobby. It's not a board game, it's a role-playing game, but definitely had a huge impact on the hobby. And then another game, Magic the Gathering, a card game where you keep buying cards to play the game. And again, like it or not, that game allowed many board game stores to pop up all over the world, and it gave them income, and people would play that and Dungeons and Dragons, and they moved over to board game. And then the third game is a game called Catan, originally called Settlers of Catan, from Klaus Teuber. And that game, which was like the culmination of German game design, because if you look in the history, Germans very much eschewed war games after the Second World War. While Americans kind of really enjoyed war games. So there was two separate game designs. Americans were playing either war games or they were playing lots of games like Monopoly, make money, roll dice. And when Catan came out, it was such a revelation to everybody. It was a game in which nobody was eliminated. There was victory points. You had to actively trade with other people. And it became incredibly popular in Germany, but kind of left Germany and exploded, came to America, and then American and German designers started cross-pollinating. German designers started taking American things. Americans started taking other ones. And then because of the growth, it wasn't just America and Germany anymore. Then France got involved, then Italy, and we're starting to see global growth. Nowadays, Japan is a very big cauldron of board game design. We're starting to see India, which has a good chunk of the world's population, starting to make games. And this globalization has had all these designers and publishers going back and forth. And modern board gaming in the past 20 years has just exploded. But it starts to me with the growth of the internet, and then those three games I mentioned really is what changed the tide.
Is this also where the term Eurogame comes from, opposed to, I don't know what is opposed to actually, opposed to more thematic driven US games? Would this be accurate to say?
Yeah, there's some weird terminology that I'm very cautious of because a lot of people haven't heard it. When I first got into the hobby, we called them German games. And then it turned into Euro games because a lot of them started coming from France and Italy, and now Poland and Czech Republic and many other countries are making these. But they're often called Euro games in the hobby. And a Euro game basically means you are doing a lot of things in the game to get points. Nobody is usually eliminated. There's not a lot of rolling dice. There's not a lot of attacking other players. Although all that can happen in a game. Even Catan, one of the most famous of these so-called Euro games, you put the robber on someone else to steal from them. But in American style games were about rolling dice and attacking. But nowadays, it's almost impossible. We say Euro games, but most of the Euro games I play these days are designed in Japan, or they're from Brazil or America. And some of the most what we call American games I played come from France or Poland. I'm just amused by that. But those are the terms that we use in the hobby.
Which reminds me to something else that I feel unnoticed. Maybe you could dive into that a bit deeper, because you already mentioned like different mechanisms or different ways games are made. Let me give you one personal experience. I played chess for a long period of time. Never played it well, but I played chess with friends and so on. And I have to say, chess playing eventually always was sort of a frustration for me, because typically people I played with played a bit better than I did. And my experience always was like I played usually pretty good, let's say, until the mid game or something. And then I made one freaking mistake. I overlooked something. And like the work of 1 hour is gone, because when you play against someone who's a bit better, you lose a rook or something and you're gone. You just rolled over. It seems that also some board games in the past worked a bit like that, like Monopoly or something. The person who started winning then won exponentially. But modern games, I'm just thinking of a game I just played recently, Heat, for instance, the racing game. It has mechanisms in there that even when in the last, it pulls you forward again so that I think the better player still wins, but the weaker players never have the feeling like, great, I lost after 5 minutes and now I can look into, I don't know, the air. Is there something to that?
Sure. I mean, modern games have really pushed towards that. Yeah, I'm the same as you with chess. When I was a teenager, I studied chess. I tried to play chess, and I got frustrated because if someone's better than me, I wasn't going to win. But I also didn't like the idea of it just being all luck, because then why even try? And modern gaming does a good job at mixing this strategy with a bit of luck. There's a smidgen of luck, and that works really well. I'm going to win, but I don't know everything that's out. And the thing that you were talking about, we call it a catch-up mechanism or rubber banding, rubber band coming in, where people in last place might get some extra advantages to help them catch up. Now, some people don't like that. Some people lean towards the chess. I will win because I'm better than you. But I've found most people enjoy a game that feels close, as anybody can win it.
Another aspect that I have a hard time wrapping my head around is complexity versus simplicity. I mean, on Board Game Geek, one of the most biggest sites where all games are listed, you have sort of a complexity rating, which should give you an indication of how. I would probably say that the term complexity is wrong. It rather gives you, I would rather say it's a complicatedness of rules, maybe, would probably be rather my explanation. I don't know. But my point is, what changed with the mechanisms and the type of development that a game takes? Chess, for instance, is, in my opinion, a very good example for a game that is actually very easy to learn, because everyone who is moderately intelligent can learn chess within 15 minutes or 10 minutes. The rules, mind you. But of course, you will not win against someone who is good, because the second level, like the strategy and all of that, is like a life worth of learning. On the other hand, there are games, as I mentioned before, like, I don't know, Brass Birmingham, these games, which has an unbelievable amount of exceptions and rules and this and that. So can you, I don't know, maybe explain a little bit what happened there?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I think people look for that complexity. In America, we have the phrase that most board games would stick on them called a minute to learn, a lifetime to master. And that's the idea of chess. Although even chess has some oddities to it. You can teach someone chess in a minute, but then try to explain castling and pensant. Those are some odd rules, right, that are in that game. So nowadays, modern games, they try to make the game super balanced. You just talked about this, games that are balanced, but with that balance often comes a lot of complexity. Now, you can avoid games with this level of complexity. There are still many, many, many simple games that have come out every year. Card games in particular, there's lots of easy, simple card games that come out that lots of people can play. And on the Dice Tower, we try to make note of that because we want to point that some people love that huge complexity, right? But I found that most people in the world, they like some complexity, but they just want to turn their brain off a little bit and have some fun. But the good news is that there are many, many, many of those games being made today.
Even though they are simpler, doesn't necessarily mean they are just lucky, right? They are just simpler in terms of rules, but the dynamic of the game can still be quite challenging.
Sure. And I'm hesitant when I say simpler games. Some people take that as a simplistic, mindless game, but it doesn't have to be that way.
Let's rather use the word easy in the sense of easy to accessible, maybe easy to learn, no?
Yeah, or like you mentioned, ease of entry. Just it's easy to get into it.
Because there is also, maybe also many people do not know that, but there are like, how is it called? World board game? How is this like this world board game competition where all sorts of these board games are played in a competitive level?
Oh, yeah. So the World Series of Board Gaming, which happens in Las Vegas each September. And that's where people come and they play the best. And if you'll notice when you look at that convention, there's maybe 1,000 people playing it, maybe more, and it might grow. But that is still a small minority of people who play games. Most people just want to play a game for the enjoyment factor of it.
I just mentioned that because, as far as I understand, on this World Board Game, what was it again? World Series of Board
Gaming.
As far as I know, even games like Ticket to Ride are played there, no? Competitively.
Sure, but a game like Ticket to Ride, which is one of my favorite games, and a game that has quite a bit of luck in it, if I play you and you've never played before, I'm going to win. It has more strategy than one might think. Now, there's still a good level of, luck and things that can happen in it. I say that I would beat you if you've never played before, but if you've played some, now you could win, right? Once you know some basic strategies. And so this championship, the World Series of Board Gaming, they wanted to have some of each type of game in there because the idea of this particular championship was you need to be good at lots of games, not just one.
There's another aspect of gaming that we mentioned in passing, but I think it would be interesting to dig a little bit deeper. This is the topic of theming. So there seem to be games that have a deeper theme and others that are maybe more abstract. Did this change in the past? I have the feeling that more complex themes with stories, with history. You find games today to all sorts of historic events. You find themes to glass making, to, I don't know, industrial games, all that sort of thing. Is this mostly just how would you call it in English, a window dressing, or how do you see this whole theming aspect in games?
Well, theming helps people find a game that they enjoy. I have a lot of games that have just unique, odd themes to them, but someone might be attracted to that theme. Maybe the theme is about photography, for example. So yeah, it's fun. If you like photography, you can get into it. Now, theme has been existing for a while to some degree. I mean, even a deck of cards has a theme. There's kings and queens, but that theme has gotten lost in time. And I don't know how castles move in chess. But if you look at early games from the 1800s and 1900s, they were always themed, usually about virtuous. Be a good person. Mm-hmm. These kids' games would be like, go here, go to school, and that theming. And I mentioned earlier Dungeons and Dragons. That was a theme that people really liked because it was all about theme, about the going in, fighting into a dungeon with the fighter and the warrior and the magician. And that's not a theme for everybody, but people started realizing that you could pick anything you like and make a board game about it. So honestly, if you're watching this and you can think of a theme, if you have an industry that you like, a hobby, I bet you almost anything there's a board game about it. Like here, last night I just played this game here called Lunch Atop a Skyscraper. And this is a theme about taking a picture of a bunch of guys it's a very famous picture, who are sitting on a steel girder and finding the right group of guys to sit on that thing. That's what the game is about. We never even would have thought of that 30 years ago, but now there's a game about it.
And sometimes the theme is stronger incorporated into the game mechanisms than in other cases, no?
Oh, sure. I mentioned the games like chess. We call them abstract strategy games, checkers, backgammon. There's no theme in those games at all, really. And a lot of games today will have those, and some games will have a theme, but that theme is barely there. You're just moving pieces and crunching numbers. While other games, if you took the theme out of it, there would be almost no game.
I just have it here beside me. Final Girl, for instance. No, Final Girl is like a game that's totally around a horror movie, and if you take the theme out, then you're just throwing die, no? And then and what is happening now?
Right.
It's more about the story, right?
Yes.
Something else, we mentioned chess and the older games for a longer period of time. I'm wondering, there's something, I mean, Nassim Taleb calls it Lindy effect, but it's actually just like an empirical observation. The idea is that when you ask yourself, how long will a particular thing, like a piece of art, a book, a game, how long will this be still existing in the future? So the idea is, as long as it goes in the past, as long as it will go in the future. So in other words, if you have a book that is like, let's say the Bible or something like this, which is thousands of years in print, it will most likely be there for another long period of time. Whereas a book that is published today, how high is the likelihood that it will be published in 50 years? Probably not so high. So now we have a lot of games like chess, you mentioned others, that are still going very, very strong, so to speak. Do you have the feeling that there is a board game or something like that could in the future remove chess or these games from its throne? Or did the whole landscape change?
The landscape has changed, but it's really hard. I'll say this. This is 2025. I said there was 5,000 games that came out this year. I can almost say with a certainty that in 100 years, nobody will be playing any game that came out this year. That being said, I can't say that about every year. The occasional game comes out that is a watershed moment. I mentioned Catan. We said Ticket to Ride. There's a game that came out 10 years ago called Codenames. There are some games that could last for a long period of time. How long will they last? I don't know. Chess survived for a long time because there wasn't a lot of competition. There wasn't many other games to go up against it. What games today will last hundreds of years in the future? I don't know. Poker. But after, other than that, even Catan, as popular as it is, will be around in 100 years? Maybe, but one never really knows. It is now, 30 years old, Catan. That's not that old, but still very popular for being 30 years old. But in the world of board gaming, that's pretty long. But as for longevity beyond that, all we can do is guess.
There's another elephant in the room, which I find very fascinating, actually. This is the aspect of technology, of digital technology, if you will. There's, a common understanding that you often read or hear when people talk about innovation that goes something along that line. Yeah, well, there is something new, let's say the car, and because the car is there, the carriage will be replaced by the car. So that's the usual idea. But what Kevin Kelly actually in his book, a very good book, analyzed is that this is in fact not true for a large number of technologies. Often the new technology comes on top or aside of the old technology. I mean, we don't go with carriages today and horses anymore, really, unless for touristic purposes, maybe, or some special occasions, maybe. But how do you see it with games? Because it was, I think many people would have believed that the digital game, the computer game, would have replaced the physical games, the board games, the card games. I would say that clearly did not happen, although they are probably much bigger than board gaming, I suppose, no? How do you see that relationship?
It's not quite the same thing. So, for example, let's use a more modern thing, digital books. Mm-hmm. So digital books and books, a book that you hold, those are the same thing. The only difference is you're holding a book and you can turn the pages. A digital book, and digital books are getting better. They make you feel like you're holding a book. The page looks like an actual page from a book. And digital books are slowly decreasing the sales of books. Now, I don't think they'll ever get rid of books completely, but they definitely have lowered it for many, many people. Most bookstores have gone out of business. There's still some around. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying digital books are destroying books, but they definitely are competing with them on a very high level. Video games and board games are not the same thing. They are both games, and you can play video games, but it's not the same thing because you don't have human opponents playing the game with you. And yes, video games have gotten better where you can have voice and you can talk to people, you can put them up on the screen and see them, but it's just not the same thing as sitting around a table. And in fact, board gaming has exploded over the past 20 years. And part of that, I think, is almost a backlash to digital because people are tired of just sitting in front of a screen. And sometimes you just want to sit with other people. Do more people play video games than board games? Yes, it is probably 100-to-1 ratio.
Mm-hmm.
I'm one of the biggest board game reviewers in the world. And when it comes to video game reviewers, there's probably 1,000 who are bigger than me. That's just the way it is. But that doesn't mean it's getting rid of board games.
Well, that's really interesting. I mean, there were, I just forgot which systems this were, but I think this was even the Game Boy in the late 80s, early 90s. I think you could have these cables where you're connected to Game Boys or something. Then you could, or some such thing, and you could play games with people like that were in the same room and stuff. But that really did not pick up that much. And this would also have been my question, to sort of like a backlash to people are a bit sick of the constant digital flow around them and do not want to have this when they play with friends?
Yeah, I think so. I think people just want to have some freedom away from the screens. And again, I'm not pretending that it's board games is bigger than video games or pushing it. I just think that, yeah, sometimes my family is all here for Christmas. And sometimes we all like to sit around the TV and we'll play a big video party game, maybe Mario Kart Racing, a racing game, or some party game on a TV. But we also like to sit around and play a board game too. And I think the two can be in the same space.
And then there is maybe, I don't know, conflict might be too big a word, but there are board games who use digital technology, let's say apps, or for instance, there are these echoes, simple games where you just listen to something, or there are board games where the app is helping you, like in telling the story or showing you, I don't know, locations and what have you. This seems to be something that some board gamers really do not like, and others, I don't know, how do you see this conflict?
I would argue
is a
that the people who don't like it are a very tiny minority. For most people, especially those under the age of 40, electronic involvement is part of your life. I wake up every morning and Alexa tells me the weather. I don't get mad that I'm not reading it in a newspaper. Instead, I'm hearing it from electric thing. My car has so many electronic components to it. I use a GPS, an electronic component to go. And someone could say, well, actually, you should just use a map and directions. No, that's nonsense. So having electronics as part of gaming, it doesn't make it worse. And I'll never understand the arguments that say it does. If you don't want to do it, fine. But it's like any game. I don't want to play chess anymore, so I don't play chess. You can not play any game. It's also in a very small minority of games. But if it helps make the game easier, whether it teaches the game, whether it does the upkeep of maybe how much money everybody has, why would we not accept that technology? It almost feels a bit just anti-technology to say that. Is it taking over the games? Is it turning a board game into a video game? Not really.
What I find fascinating, because you mentioned at the beginning, there might be 40 people on the world who likes to play this and that game, and so you now can find those. So this type of what the connection with internet and other services allowed us to do. And I mean, I personally found interest into board games again, maybe some years ago, maybe 3-4 years ago again. And I was really surprised because from my childhood, you went to a shop and bought a game and that's that. So, but today you have all of the systems like Board Game Geek, where you have like every board game listed and you have like the forums there and you can ask the questions about the game and all of that. Then you have like the Board Game Arena where you can play the board games online against other people, right? Or things like BG Stats, like a small app, which I find extraordinary helpful to like log your games and to help you with the scoring and that stuff. So this overlap for me is really fascinating, how niche things can suddenly explode globally. You know what I mean?
Sure. Although a lot of things that explode globally also tend to die down, right? Things become popular, then they become less popular. And I think board gaming is settling down now. It was very, very popular. It's settling down. The reason you're not seeing it necessarily slow in growth is because there's new sections of the world that are discovering about it. Like I said, India has over 1 billion people. So even if just a fraction of a percent of those people become involved in board gaming, it's going to almost double the hobby size, right? And we're seeing more folks in China and in Asia in general and Africa. There's just so many countries that are becoming into board gaming that I think the number of it's still going to grow for the next 10, 20 years.
Maybe to slowly wrap up our conversation, maybe two more questions. One question would be, if some people maybe they played as children or something and then didn't have the connection anymore to board games, what tip would you give them where to start if they would like to venture into, I don't know, maybe this is something for me. Where would you recommend them to start? Maybe which games or what tip would you give?
I often tell people when someone says, what game should I play? I ask them what you're interested in, and then I try to give them a specific game. And this is self-serving, obviously, but on the Dice Tower, we have a lot of videos, and we have talked about top 10 welcoming games. We call them welcoming. They're to jump into the hobby to play for the first time. Those are games that I would recommend that you look at. We've done several of those lists. We've mentioned some in this video already. Catan, Ticket to Ride. There's a game called Carcassonne about building a city. There's a game that came out this year called Hot Streak, which is a racing game. And Alexander mentioned Heat, which is another racing game. These are all games that people can jump into and play. There's not a lot of rules overhead, but they're really fun and engaging.
And maybe as a final question, we also talked a little bit about what does it do with our future, with our next years? And you already mentioned that games can teach us something, that the socializing, all of that stuff. Do you think that, I mean, you have the feeling when you look into social media or the current politics that society seems to get more fractured and more polarized and all of that. Do you have the feeling that something like board games could help us to ground ourselves again more as a society and to also learn that you can play with people maybe who even elect a different president or what have you?
I'm very cautious on, like, I love board games. It is my hobby. It is my job. I like them a lot. They are toys. You can learn a lot from them. They are very good educational wise, but I would never put board games before my family. I would say they're more important than, say, books. Can they be used? Yes. Can they affect change? Possibly, but they're still entertainment at the end of the day. Do we need entertainment? We do. We need a way to relax and enjoy ourselves. Are they educational? Yes. But I wouldn't put such a heavy emphasis on them because I think when you try to do so, it takes away from what made them great in the first place.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, this discussion also that took place with books, right? There was always the question to authors, do you think that your book will change something in the world? I don't know, something like that, right? Or is it quote unquote just entertainment? But in the end, it turned out that some books seem to influence something in the world, no? They change
Definitely happens.
Our thinking, our culture.
You can point to many books that have changed our society in different ways. How many people have written a book that's just influenced society? There's many that are out there. Gaming, it would be harder to point to something like that. Maybe it will happen, but I don't think so because I think people don't look at games other than at the end of the day, it's mostly entertainment. People try to make games make statements, but I don't think they have wide appeal.
But at least I would say it's entertainment that brings people together and doesn't separate them, no?
Yes, that I agree on.
Tom, thank you so much for taking time. And maybe I will also put all of these links into the show notes because you also have like dice gaming conventions. I mentioned the Dice Tower West, East, the
Yes.
cruise and so on. There are also some of these events in Europe. By the way, maybe this is the last question. Would you recommend someone who is not really experienced in playing to go to such a convention, or would the person be overwhelmed?
I would recommend you go to a convention, but I think you should look to see what kind of convention you're going to. Like if you went to the biggest convention in the world, the Spiel Game Fair at Essen, Germany each year, I think you would be overwhelmed. But if you went to a smaller board game convention, I think you could be okay there. You just have some fun and a lot of these conventions, like if you come to one of my conventions, for example, we have a newcomers meetup. It's a way to meet other people who are new, and it's an easy way to step in.
Great. Tom, thank you so much for taking time.
All right. Well, thank you for having me.